Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a list of my favorite books from 2019. I don't know how many of these books were standouts and oh my gosh, I can't go over how good this book was kind of books, but I did really enjoy them. There are certain things about some of the books on this list that I really felt they deserved to be on this list, but I'll get into it. There's some elements to them that they don't make them way up here for me, but they still, I thought, were really great books. We're gonna go ahead and get the one out of the way that is kind of the exception to this. Vinland Saga. You guys have probably already heard me talk about Vinland Saga. It is a manga series and it is about Vikings. We follow a young boy whose father was killed, and we kind of get a back and forth at the beginning of the story, trying to figure out what happened, why our main character is where he's at, and why he's so bent on revenge. And then along the way, you sort of start to get the perspective of some of the enemies, and they're very interesting in some ways. I would say they have more going on, more complexities than the main character himself initially, and it's very good. The premise does not necessarily do it justice or is a very good representation of how much depth is in this story and what there is within it, because there are some really powerful moments in this story. Next up, we have Therithmatist by Brandon Sanderson. I sort of feel bad for you guys because I know I like so many Sanderson books, but gosh darn it, the man writes a lot of books. Therithmatist, I feel, is so underhyped. The magic system in this book, everybody always talks about Sanderson's magic systems, especially Mistborn's, but the magic system in this one was so interesting and different. Basically, they have the ability to draw with chalk and create chalklings, which are like little chalk monsters, and it sounds kind of lame the way I'm describing it, but they have a means of doing different shapes to create a defense and certain things they can do that sort of attack the person they're against, and people learn how to do it at this one particular school. We have a character who goes to the school, but he's not really a part of the Therithmatist part of the school. He's kind of a part of the you're an average person part of the school, but he has dreams of being a Therithmatist. You instantly feel for this character. He's very likable. He has some flaws, but I think that just made him more realistic. Next up, we have Before They Are Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. This is the second book in the First Law trilogy, and I'm a little bummed out to say that the trilogy as a whole, the whole trilogy doesn't get to be on this list because it was really the second one that I loved, and I thought it was the best one. The thing that I found to make the First Law trilogy so good was the character work, and in the first one, you're getting to know the characters, so you don't really see it at its fullest potential, and in the third one, the character work was still there, but sometimes it got put on the back burner because at the forefront was a lot of action and a lot of kind of coming to a conclusion. And in that second one, it was the perfect moment of everything because there was still action, and I really enjoyed the action scenes. There were some really good moments for the characters, but the best thing about the book I found were the interactions between the characters. And seeing all of these characters that feel so fleshed out and so real, you really feel like you know them at this point, seeing how they grow or how they just in general have to kind of fight against or embrace the things that are brought up by the other characters and the interactions they have were so good. I'm gonna go ahead and stick with second books in trilogies, and the next one would be The Wicked King by Holly Black. And this is another one where I'm a little sad that the whole trilogy wasn't on this list, but this second one is the one that stood out to me. And this story is just so many twists and turns, and it's dramatic, and it's kind of the stereotype of what young adult fiction is for some people. I kind of don't even care because I just found it very entertaining. And the second one in particular, I constantly didn't know if our main character could trust other people. The setup that makes a lot of this book really work is that it's a mortal in a fae world. The mortal has the ability to lie, but the fae can't. And so the fae have to find tricky ways of saying things to where they're not lying, but they're misleading you. And so there were so many times in that second book that you're constantly wondering, is this person tricking her right now? Are they trying to get something from her right now? What am I not catching in their wording? And I thought that was so fun. It made the scheming so entertaining and juicy, and it was fun, and the ending was great. The next book on this list is kind of the opposite of these in that it was the conclusion to a story, and I really liked the conclusion, and that would be Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I thought that the way that she dived into our characters was really well done. If you are not really a character-driven reader, or you don't like getting to really fall back into what makes our characters the way they are, and you kind of want more plot, you want to focus more on the present, that's not really what these books do. But one of my favorite things about books is literally just sitting and getting to know the characters. And so for me, it actually really worked. I do think that the time spent getting to know the characters and seeing their past, it does take up quite a bit of the duology as a whole, and I think the book is marketed very much as this exciting, intense heist story, but the exciting, intense parts for me, especially in the second one, I actually thought they were almost so unpredictable that I was just like, well, whatever, I'm along for the ride because I like the characters, which is similar actually to, I think, the Joe Abercrombie books. I just liked the characters, so whatever came up, I was like, all right, let's see where this goes. And that's kind of how I was for Crooked Kingdom. But I do think that the Six of Crows duology has a little bit more plot to it, maybe, than Abercrombie's First Law trilogy. But the fact that both this and Abercrombie's work were so character-driven, I think is what made them stand out for me. Next up on this list is a book I read way back at the beginning of the year, and that would be Crown of Feathers by Nikki Powell-Preto. I have mentioned quite a few times that while this story is young adult, I think if you're the kind of person that only likes to read young adult here and there and you prefer adult fantasy, this one is still probably a good one to pick up because while a lot of the tone is still it's more youthful, it's got a lot of lore. The amount of time that the author has put into developing the lore is really admirable, I think, and it's one of those things where she weaves it into the story in a lot of clever, creative ways, especially before the chapters. She has what I call extras, and it would make for a really fun reread. I'm really excited for the second one. It's gonna be a trilogy, and I think that it's one of those stories that you get to the end and then you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, now I gotta go back to see all those times, what happened in the past. She was alluding to this the whole time and she was setting this up. I just think the way she's done that was really cool to see. It definitely makes for a more historical feel to it. Not saying it's like a boring textbook or something like that, but if you're the kind of person that likes history, you loved history class in school, I think you would really eat this book up. There are 3 main point of views in this story, and I enjoyed 2 of them so much. It's not that the other one I thought was badly written, I just didn't like that character as much. But the other 2 characters, oh man, I could not get enough of them. It kind of has a Mulan and Shang feel to it because the girl is disguised as a boy. There's this tension because they don't necessarily get along, and so you wonder, are they gonna become friends? Is this gonna work out? Is this gonna happen the whole time? And the way that their relationship develops throughout the story is really fun to see. I also feel like the animal companion element of the story is great because the setup is our main character, she has a burning desire, totally pun intended, to have a phoenix, and she joins this group of a secret rebellion of Phoenix riders. Next up, we have The Toll by Neal Shusterman. This is the 3rd and final book in the arc of the Scythe trilogy. You guys have heard me talk a lot about Scythe, and it's a futuristic society where we've conquered death, and to prevent overpopulation, we have people that go around and kill each other. That's the quick summary of it. It's quite morbid, but there's a lot of really funny humor in it, which you wouldn't necessarily expect. The last book was definitely very plot-driven. There were certain things about it that I kind of wish were condensed, but ultimately the ending of it, I really enjoyed the ending. I really enjoyed seeing how everything came together. I still felt like Neal Shusterman was constantly exploring what this world would look like if this was really the situation. And I just thought for the end of this trilogy that I've enjoyed so much, I was pleased with this conclusion. Next up, we have Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. It's funny, every time I think about this book, I don't know that I think of it the way I think of Vinland Saga. Every time I talk about Vinland Saga, I'm like, it's so good, you guys gotta read it. And I go a little crazy and I get really annoying. But with Sorcery of Thorns, and maybe I don't think of it that way, but when I think about it, I was like, that was fun. I liked that. And it makes me happy. There's just something about that story that when I think about it, it gives me the warm fuzzies. I definitely think it's difficult to pull off a good standalone that doesn't feel rushed, doesn't feel too short, that you feel like the stakes are high, but they're not cheesy or over the top and overdone and they're not underplayed. It actually feels relevant to what's happening and makes you care about the characters even more and you want them to succeed. That's hard to pull off. And it's also hard to pull off making you care about the characters in a shorter amount of time. But I thought Margaret Rogerson did a really good job. It was a one and done story, and it was one that kind of left me wanting more because I enjoyed this world. I enjoyed this story that she's created. I missed the characters, but also I'm kind of glad that it didn't get drawn out and made into something bigger. It was a good time. I liked it. The last book on this list is interesting for me because if I think of this as a first book in a duology, a trilogy, in some kind of a series, then it's an absolute favorite for me. But as of right now, there's no concrete, there is going to be a sequel set in place yet, which is a little bit of a bummer, but I enjoyed the first book a lot if it does end up being a first book, and that would be Descendant of the Crane. It took me a while to get into this book. For a long time, I was kind of just not digging it, and then something at some point clicked, and all of a sudden I was really intrigued. There is a lot of family drama in this book. The setup is that our main character is basically the heir to the throne. Her father dies, murdered, she believes, and she's not meant to look into his death because it's already been deemed something natural, but she's positive that he was poisoned, that he was murdered. So she's trying to kind of go against her own courts and find out the truth, but she seeks out some magic users that are looked down upon in her kingdom. And the family dynamics were so interesting because her mom's kind of crazy and she has a full-blooded brother, and then she has these other characters that are kind of like adopted siblings for her. You get to know more about her relationship with her father who has died. Just really a lot to it that I ended up enjoying so much. But oh my gosh, based off that ending, I need a sequel. I need the next one because I feel like this story is not done. I do want to add an honorable mention that is, it's worse than hating a book is to love a book and hate the ending. But I do want to mention this one particular story that I read this year because I loved so much of it and the ending just did not work for me, but that's not the case for everybody. So The Bird and the Blade. This is a story that it is not the easiest to read. It follows the girl who is the slave of a descendant of Genghis Khan. There's a lot of interesting familial politicking in a way, and you're not really getting that invested in that element of the story, but it does play a role. So it's historical fiction, and our main character is kind of swept along into the survival of one of these descendants. And the way that the relationship builds throughout the story is it was really well done, I thought. And it is a retelling of an opera, which I think was based in a story that already existed. So it's like a retelling of a retelling. But so much of the story I liked. The reason it's not the easiest to read is because this character has so many things that if we look at her the way she is when we first meet her, we're like, girl, get a backbone. Come on, stick up for yourself. We kind of have this. At least, I mean, I feel like that's what other people would. I was reading it thinking, all right, what's going on? Because why does she have this mindset? And when you get to find out why, it's so tragic, but you understand and you feel for her. And I feel like the character development and the work the author put into showing this character was really well done, but I hated the ending. I wish I didn't hate the ending, but it is a retelling, and I'm guessing that is how the original ended from what I've seen. That's basically the ending of the original, but I didn't like it. But a lot of you might end up liking it. So because I enjoyed so much of the rest of it, I still felt like it was worth mentioning. That's it for some of my favorites of this year. Please let me know, of course, what your favorites were. I would love to know. Let me know if you felt similarly to some of these or if you completely disagree and had completely differing opinions. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.